Okay, so ready to dive in.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Today we're taking a deep dive into the world of pressure sensors.
Yeah.
I know, pressure sensors.
Not exactly the most glamorous topic at first glance.
Right. But we've been digging through some research and articles, and
Well,
honestly,
it's a pretty fascinating stuff.
totally, pressure sensors are like these hidden heroes in so many systems, and we're going to learn about how they work and why they're so important,
Yeah.
especially in thermal systems, right?
Exactly. Thermal systems, boilers, all that jazz.
Okay, but first things first.
Sure. Lay it on me.
What exactly is a pressure sensor? I mean, we all kind of get thermometers, right, for temperature. But what about pressure? What's the equivalent there?
Well, you can think of a pressure sensor as a sort of specialized nerve ending, but for machines.
Okay. Nerve ending for machines.
Yeah, like just as our bodies use nerves to sense touch and pressure, machines use these sensors to kind of feel the pressure inside.
Inside.
Yeah, inside pipes, tanks, all those systems.
Got it, got it.
And then that information gets used to monitor and control the system.
Okay, so they're like these tiny little pressure detectives.
Exactly.
And you mentioned thermal systems earlier, and the outline I have here says they're particularly important in those.
Absolutely. Thermal systems, like, think about the boilers that heat our homes or the giant turbines that generate electricity. They operate under incredible pressure.
Yeah, makes sense.
And if that pressure isn't monitored super carefully, things can get really, really bad.
Okay, so really, really bad, meaning what? Like what could actually happen?
Well, I mean, worst case scenario, you're talking about boiler explosions.
Yikes.
Right.
But even if it's not quite that dramatic, what else could go wrong?
Well, even if you don't have an explosion, inaccurate pressure readings can still mess things up.
Okay, how so?
Well, like imagine a turbine. If it's operating at the wrong pressure, it's going to be way less efficient, which means it burns more fuel, creates more emissions, all for the same amount of power. And over time, that extra wear and tear can really shorten the lifespan of the equipment.
Wow, I never thought about the long-term consequences like that.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So it's not just about preventing immediate disasters, it's also about efficiency and making sure things last.
Exactly. And that's where the different types of pressure sensors come in.
Okay, so there's more than one kind.
Oh, yeah, there are a bunch. Like, you've got piezoresistive sensors, which change their electrical resistance based on the pressure.
Uh,
And then there are capacitive sensors, which measure changes in capacitance.
Capacitance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and tons of others, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, depending on what you're using them for.
Okay, so that's getting a bit technical for me. Can we back up a second? Let's say I was actually looking at a pressure gauge.
Okay, yeah.
What kind of units would I see there? Like, what are the common ones?
You'd probably see pascals, that's PA, or kilopascals, kPa, megapascals, MPa. Sometimes bar. It really depends on the system and how much pressure it's dealing with.
Okay, that makes sense. So what if I saw a reading of 0? Would that be a good thing? Like everything's safely shut down?
Mm.
Or is that a bad thing? Like something's broken?
Well, a 0 reading could actually mean either. It depends.
Depends on what.
Like, if you're shutting down a system for maintenance, then a 0 reading is exactly what you want to see. But if the system is supposed to be running and you suddenly see a 0,
Yeah.
that could mean a sensor has failed. Or there's been a sudden pressure loss, like a leak in a pipeline, which obviously needs attention right away.
So it's kind of a cliffhanger. 0 could be good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. It all depends on the context.
You know, I was reading about a boiler explosion that was actually caused by a faulty pressure sensor.
Yeah.
I mean, how often does that actually happen? Like, do these things fail a lot?
Well, sensor failures are, thankfully, pretty rare, but they can happen. That's why in systems where a failure could have really serious consequences,
Yeah.
they build in redundancy. So you might have multiple sensors, all measuring the same pressure.
Oh, okay. Backup sensors.
Exactly. So that if one fails, the others can still give accurate readings and trigger any safety systems.
Makes sense, especially in those high-risk systems.
Right.
So we've been talking a lot about thermal systems, but you mentioned earlier that these sensors are kind of everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Like, where else might we find them?
I mean, you'd be surprised. Refrigeration systems that keep our food cold, they use pressure sensors. The air intake in your car engine uses pressure sensors to figure out the right fuel-air mix for combustion.
Huh.
Even everyday things like pressure cookers, they use pressure sensors to keep the pressure inside safe.
Well, I really had no idea how much we rely on these things. So what's the big takeaway here for our listeners?
I think the big takeaway is that even though you don't see them, pressure sensors are totally crucial. for safety, for efficiency, for making sure things run smoothly in tons of different systems that we rely on every single day.
It's like they're working behind the scenes to keep everything running.
Exactly.
So next time you're, I don't know, driving your car, adjusting your thermostat,
Yeah.
or even using your pressure cooker,
Right.
take a second to think about those little pressure sensors doing their job.
Absolutely.
And if anyone out there wants to learn more about different kinds of sensors and how they're used, well, there's a ton of information out there, just waiting to be discovered.
It's a whole world of sensors out there.
So happy exploring, everyone.
Happy exploring.